Thank you very much, Bronwyn, for that generous introduction. I accept the nomination. You never get rid of it. No, I'm joking, totally. It's really a pleasure for me to be back here at Chatham House, which I have so much respect for. And good to be here in the immediate early days post COP30. And I'm very grateful, Bronwyn. Thank you for putting this together. And also thank you for your stewardship these past years. You've been doing a great job here. I appreciate it. So, my friends, I'm going to dig right into it because there's much to think about and a great deal of territory to cover. We're back here after COP, really reeling a little bit, I think, determined to still focus on a challenge, which is not vexing at all when it comes to science, which is not complicated when it comes to solutions, but nevertheless remains naggingly, maddeningly more resistant to resolution than good politics or good diplomacy should allow. So just a few days ago, before I came here, I was in Boston at home, and I came across some papers in my office. And there it was, a newspaper, not even old enough yet to have any yellowed edges. And it blared out, landmark COP28 deal, agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. That was in The Guardian, blaring headlines, and headlines like that around the world. Agreed to transition away from fossil fuel. The details promised optimism if you go reinvestigate them, not business as usual. And after years of struggle to agree on a diplomatic communique that firmly, unequivocally identified the root cause of the climate crisis, burning fossil fuels without capturing the emissions. That's it. That's the whole thing that is driving the world into this corner where we're spending more money than we want to or should, and not on the things that we want to and should. So after years of struggle to agree on this diplomatic communique, 194 nations on this planet signed on to the most important single mission statement since Paris. It was a remarkable outcome that would not have been possible without actually the UAE, a fossil fuel producing nation, stepping up, corralling other fossil fuel companies, bringing them to the table. And it wouldn't have happened without the help of commitment of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, particularly, but obviously the work of Sultan Al Jaber, who put his heart into it. And he bridged the worlds of fossil fuel and clean energy in order to shape the COP decision, notwithstanding criticism from some said, how can you possibly have somebody from the oil industry involved in this? Well, you can't get an agreement ever if you don't. 194 nations agreed to meet concrete targets to reduce polluting emissions. And remember, I just used the word polluting. Everybody has forgotten that greenhouse gases are pollution. They kill people. About 7 million of them a year are dying now because of bad air quality that comes from the particulates from the open burning of coal and also the not so open but nevertheless emissions-filled burning of combined cycle plants as well as normal gas, the old generation that's still around. So you had 194 nations signed on to be part of an accepted vision of the future, where we were going to be part of the greatest economic transformation in human history. And the global business community agreed to meet these objectives. And they all agreed to do it, my friends, keeping faith with the judgment of thousands of the world's most competent scientists that it is the right thing to do for our economies, for our health, in order to avoid the worst consequences of the crisis. Those are the words of the ICC report, of 2018 that began to drive our action at a higher level. So we promised young people a better future. And today we're forced to ask, well, what happened to the promise that we made future generations? Obviously, it's no secret that twice now, the same president, without the company of any other leader, without a shred of peer-reviewed evidence supporting him, that he has erased the United States' name from the Paris Agreement. And the world is now still adjusting to the repercussions when my country, the planet's second biggest emitter, turns from leader to denier, delayer, and divider. And because the stakes are so high, even though America's absence hurts, we just don't have the luxury, folks, which is why I wanted to come and talk here. We don't have the luxury of losing momentum in the race to mitigate and avoid the worst climate consequences. Consequences which scientists tell us, every fraction of a degree is critical to what the impacts will be on life as we know it on this planet. Little things, just little things they warned us about, like extreme heat that makes outdoor work impossible in many parts of the planet. Rivers that disappear, causing water shortages for billions of people who live by those rivers as the ice melts off of the Himalayas and the Alps and the mountains and glaciers of the world. Little things like rivers that disappear, causing water shortages, limited food production that skyrockets prices, and pandemics that spread around the globe because viruses do not die in that heat. In fact, they are accelerated by it. For everyone rightfully worried today about affordability, and we should be worried about it, I just said rightfully, because it's a major challenge in many parts of the world, and particularly we see it at home. I know it's a challenge here for the political world of Britain. And so just imagine, though, if the things that all these scientists are telling us will happen if we don't take action, if that happens, imagine what happens to food prices. Imagine what happens to supply chains. Imagine what happens to health, which is critical to building community and to actually having a secure country and a secure community. Consequences, every single one of them, that too many in positions of responsibility are now just throwing up their hands and sort of take the risk. Let's see what comes. Even after the UAE consensus offered an alternative pathway of unbelievable opportunity. Now just think, 2 years after Dubai in Belém, Brazil, a draft resolution was put forward so weak that our friends from the European Union, backed by the Starmer government, actually had to take the unusual step of threatening to walk out in protest. Why? Because, in their words, I'm quoting, the draft deal contained no science, no transitioning away from fossil fuel, but instead weakness. So how did we arrive at a moment when countries would be afraid to even restate their own hard-fought-for victories? Now, I know that when the United States walks away, old excuses find new life. I know that in these situations, China, despite being both the planet's biggest clean energy producer and the world's largest emitter, China enjoys newfound freedom from scrutiny. I know that other nations find common cause in avoiding responsibility for a problem that they rightfully say they didn't create over a century ago or more, and that they haven't exacerbated. But with their rising emissions now, as they try to claim their rightful opportunity to be able to develop, as other nations have, without their participation, the world simply cannot solve the problem today, period. The Paris Agreement, my friends, I was privileged to lead our negotiations in Paris, as well as in Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai. And I've been to more COPs than I like to say. But the Paris Agreement achieved a unity of purpose. It summoned all parties to a place of responsibility with shared, common endeavor. That's the way the world ought to work. And diplomatic faces that I recognize who are here understand the essentials of how you get what you need, notwithstanding other people resisting for various reasons. Most importantly, folks, we cannot now go backwards. We just don't have the leeway to do that. Allowing a new paradigm where big polluters band together to avoid accountability. That's what happened, and that's what's been happening. Never was the old adage of Ben Franklin more applicable than it is perhaps today when he said, if we don't hang together, we will certainly all hang alone. And despite admirable progress on challenges including deforestation and adaptation, which was good, there was a great effort there with the tropical forests forever and so forth, just a beginning. But despite that, it ought to be unacceptable for every single one of us to see a New York Times headline, quote, oil producers, but maybe not the planet, get a win as climate talks end. That headline underscores that there's really been a change in the last 2 years, a change that has been purposefully fought for and achieved by the expenditure of billions of dollars to pass on disinformation and to attack common sense itself. But I'll tell you what has not changed. Reality. There is no legitimate debate in any thoughtful quarter on this planet about the cause of the crisis. It is real, it is happening, and the only hoax is in pretending otherwise. So I've learned that in an election for a time, you can bend the laws of politics. But believe me, no one, no president, monarch, no one can bend the laws of physics. And this is about physics. And the reality that moved us to collective commitments in Paris and in Dubai in the first place is only more pronounced. The cost of inaction are infinitely more expensive than the rewards of accelerating action today. And no one has done more to try to press that case than Sir Nicholas Stern, our friend. And yet inaction literally puts billions of people in harm's way. Inaction results in trillions of dollars being spent simply to clean up the mess after it's been made and then sit around and wait for the next round. We don't even do the resilience or adaptation sufficiently. And we've seen weather now destroying lives and property, making infrastructure uninsurable. It's a reality. And it dooms us to building seawalls and to moving entire populations off of islands that will no longer be habitable. And it isn't just the faraway Pacific that these incomprehensible costs are growing. In the US, there are parts of Louisiana today where insurance premiums are now higher than the monthly mortgage payment. Parts of the Outer Banks of North Carolina where homes that families saved to build over a lifetime are carried off into the ocean now. And while home values drop 44%, in the top 2 zip codes vulnerable to wildfires. That's economics. That's about money, folks. You'd think people would stop and get a little more serious in some ways. And all of you took note in the last days about the violent storms from billions in Vietnam, the Philippines, and halfway around the world from there, and Jamaica. It's so simple. The warming of the planet, 90% of the warming goes into the ocean. That raises the moisture that rises from the ocean. Moisture travels around the planet and drops in these torrential rainstorms, and the floods grow and the intensity, the wind grows because the gradient's changing. It's straight. It is physics. And the cost of inaction, of turning away from the UAE consensus and pretending that we can just keep on burning fossil fuels forever without capturing their emissions. That's a very important quotient here. If you can capture them, terrific. I mean, I don't think it's fossil fuel per se, it's the emissions. By willful action or the soft denialism of avoidance, too many people are now tempting the soaring cost of inaction, and which is an unforced error, all the more stunning when something much better is staring us in the face and sitting there waiting for us on the other side of this transition. And in 1990, when President George H.W. Bush and Prime Minister Thatcher gathered in Rio at the first COP, the Earth Summit, they acknowledged the climate crisis, even as many leaders feared that reducing emissions meant sacrificing power and, you know, somehow sacrificing prosperity and living a diminished standard of living. Not true at all, but that's been hyped. And so 1990, I guess if I'm going back to 1990, I'm dating myself. But I've been working very hard, by the way. I turned 80 a year ago, and I'm now working hard to convince people 80 is the new 55. You know? But folks, back then, nobody had the benefit of the technology breakthroughs that have taken place now. And so we see the capacity to build power, to have grids, to be smart. And we could do that in a better, cheaper, safer, faster, and healthier way than we're doing right now. The same thing we've done for 250 years, making the crisis worse. So here's the bottom line. We do not face a lack of know-how. Today, we're blessed to have an abundance of clean power, all of it steadily becoming cheaper, faster, and better by the day, particularly with the advances being made in China. And that's a whole story in itself that we have to think about. But the fact is that, you know, what we're seeing right now with the power we have, with the technologies we have, with the sodium-ion batteries, with the now extraordinary power being produced from one wind turbine, and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper all the time, clearly cheaper than any fossil fuel production. So ours is a problem that is really a deficit of willpower, not clean power. But willpower can be recharged, and diplomacy can be reimagined. So you can win this fight. We can win this fight to accelerate the transition to clean energy, low carbon, no carbon economy. And we should be optimistic and not pessimistic, because the truth is that around the world right now, and I travel around the world still, amazing things are happening as innovators and entrepreneurs bring new technologies to the market. They're proving every day that new technology beats old commodities. And last year, for the first time in human history, by 2 to 1, the investment in clean energy was at 2.1 trillion, and the investment in fossil fuel was at 1. We've never had that imbalance. Just a week ago, there was a headline in Bloomberg that said, big, bold letters, you know who believes in climate change? The stock market. That's what's happening. The S&P Global Clean Energy Index has outpaced the S&P 500 index, the NASDAQ 100, and the MSCI World Index. And many in the global business community are investing trillions, driving marketplaces, and meeting skyrocketing consumer demand, while others have been spooked and retreat or sit on the sidelines now. And what a strange time in the world when you think about it, when some investors and CEOs who were most bullish on the climate solutions have joined political leaders in just pulling back, afraid that climate isn't good for business or politics, or just afraid. Here in the UK, I am pleased to say that your government embraces the clean energy economy as a way to reinvigorate the economy in the industrial heartlands. And it is, if you're smart about it. And we proved that with the IRA under President Biden, with the start of numerous battery companies in the United States. And Europe and is now, thank you to strong voices, including the Starmer government that stepped up and are pledged to cut emissions by 81% by 2035 and is incentivizing action with 20-year contracts and financial guarantees to companies developing offshore wind farms. Why? Because they know that climate action brings with it jobs and prosperity and cheaper power. In fact, the UK has been a model market where a first mover and innovator like Octopus Energy, and I'm head of a fund now that we're actually invested in Octopus, among other entities like this. And Energy is leading offshore wind investments on track to support, Octopus is, support renewable electricity that will be capable of powering 10 million homes. Most importantly, Octopus is making utility bills more affordable and not less, rewarding customers' clean energy choices with up to 90% savings on electricity bills. That is the story that is unfolding in many parts of the world, and increasingly people understand it has to speed up and be at scale. I see it in Australia, where Andrew Forrest in Fortescue is demonstrating 100% profitable decarbonization as the highest performing company by shareholder return on the Australian Stock Exchange in history. And it's replacing more than 6,000 gigawatts a year of fossil fuel energy with renewable power and green technology. This shift alone delivers about 800 million in annual savings. So they are a first mover. And when I was secretary, when I was the special envoy, we put together something, the First Movers Coalition, over 110 companies. Those companies all agreed to buy green now in order to send the market signal to the signal in the marketplace, on demand signal. And it's worked. And it's Google, it's Apple, it's Microsoft, it's Salesforce, it's airlines, it's automobile makers, Volvo and others pledged to buy 10% of the steel they buy to make their cars is going to be green steel. So all of this is doable if you come together and agree to try to do it and stick with it. They are driving heavy decarbonization now across heavy industries, and business can move faster and can do it profitably. And they're not alone. Around the world, the market is speaking for itself. Countries are transitioning to clean energy economy not because of morality, but because of materiality. They're doing it because of self-interest, health, security, economic growth, all under the banner of greater prosperity and a higher quality of life. So in every regard, my friends, this is already a moment of profound transformation. It's a moment when the future is being written not with ink, but with electrons. And many people are seeing the sort of electricity age, in a sense, rejuvenated in 0.20. So the artificial intelligence revolution is reimagining the boundaries of human potential. We all know that. But we also know that AI doesn't run on magic. It runs on power and has a vast amount of demand, staggering amount. You simply cannot meet this moment with the outdated mantras of drill, baby, drill, dig, baby, drill, when the real solution is a new mantra, which is build, baby, build. You have to build, and we're not. Because if we're serious about powering AI and lowering energy costs and generating clean economic growth, we have to build. You have to build clean power. You have to build a resilient grid. You have to build the infrastructure of the 21st century. And the market is already starting to make that message pretty clear. A recent LEK survey of 400 C-suite executives across the US, China, Australia, UK, France, and Germany found that 55% of them plan to increase sustainability initiatives, 57% are already seeing positive returns on those investments, and among companies with over 20 billion in revenue, that number jumps to 74%. I called the CEO of a major company in Boston. It used to be General Electric, you all know, it's got a new name now. And they've said, no matter what, no politics, they're going straight ahead and they're going to continue to invest in the turbines and in the wind and so forth. So why are they doing that, folks? They're not doing it because it's fashionable, anything but to some degree. They're doing it because it's profitable. It's about resource efficiency, margin expansion, and long-term value creation. Over 90% of CFOs canvassed plan to increase green investment budgets, not for public relations, but for profits. I can tell you we have a public equities track in our business, Galvanize. And year to date, we're up 55%, folks. Show me a bunch of other entities that can do that. So the other reality we got to stop and think about is China. China's not slowing down, China's speeding up. China doesn't have a debate about whether this is good or not. The leadership has made a commitment. This is where they're going. China has now invested $625 billion in clean energy just this year alone. And they have built and deployed more renewables than all of the rest of the world put together. Think about that. Staggering. I can tell you, I used to negotiate with them 8, 9 years ago when they weren't doing it. And they were just building coal-fired power plants. And I said, you're going to kill the whole world. And so, no, we may not light them all up. We're going to use them. We need them as backup to not having brownouts. But boy, have they proven they're on a track. They're going to eclipse everybody else. And they will, within the next 10 to 15 years, be completely energy independent, running their own show from the rest of the world. Think about the implications of that. So, looking ahead to 2030 and beyond, we should get ready for a whole new set of clean technologies, from advanced nuclear to geothermal, unlocking very deep heat, bringing 24/7 clean baseload power from Kenya to Indonesia. We're also invested in that, a company called Fervo. It's a geothermal company. 85% of the employees came out of the extraction business. They came out of oil and gas. And they're doing the extraction, but they're extracting heat, which then drives power. It is a new world. In 2024, global low-carbon electricity surpassed 40%. Solar alone doubled in just 3 years. And unlike fossil fuels, clean energy gets cheaper the more you use it. And today, efficiency is destiny. Efficiency is the cheapest, fastest, most effective way to get quick gains in reducing emissions. And we barely touch it. I could, maybe in the Q&A, we'll get into some of that. But I see firsthand that that consumers want heat pumps over boilers. And the investors want that because they understand that it strengthens their margins. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel, my friends. We already have the roadmap, one that was validated by the International Energy Agency, which found that if you follow through, if the world followed through on all the commitments that we have made, Paris, Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh, this was before we did Dubai, if we just followed through, we would be able to hold the Earth's temperature increase to 1.6 degrees. Man, that's without the full effort and energy of the world. You can smell the potential of victory when you hear that and you understand that. So it's time for us to confidently get back to the UAE consensus, which said we will transition away from fossil fuels in a way that is equitable and fair, so as to achieve net zero by 2050, and most importantly, according to the science, and accelerating in this decade. That is the strongest mission statement that's come out of any COP at any time, and we deserve to have people follow up on it and do what we've promised to do. I called today, and in the next months I'll be pushing this, that the COP presidency, which is now going to be with Australia, even though the COP will be in Turkey, that the COP presidency needs to summon to the table those 20 to 25 nations that are responsible for almost 90% of all the emissions. Stunning. If those 25 were to come together and have an agreement on a roadmap forward, even more certainly, we can win this battle and we can make people safer. We can do it in a way that builds community and serves the needs of our national and international security and do so in a way that keeps faith, which is what we always hear politicians talking about. Future generation can't have this. We don't want to be worse than our so you know the arguments, but they're not real right now to most young people in the world who think they're being let down, and they understand exactly what's happening. So I look forward to your Q&A. I think this time is critical, and it's really nice to have a battle that you can win if you just get your ass in gear and to do the things you need to do.